If you have had RSI, you might be in sometimes considerable pain. And one of the things that I found to be very helpful for me is acupuncture. So today we have Christopher Dye of Manhattan Classical Acupuncture here to discuss what this can do for you. Christopher, I'm so happy to have you. First question is, can you explain how acupuncture works?
Oh, well, that's an excellent question. I get that question from my patients all the time. So what I usually say is that there's two ways that acupuncture works. The first way is right on the spot, if you will, the place where you have pain and all the places that are connected to that. So acupuncture works by basically drawing the body's attention to that area. The body says, hey, what is this stainless steel sterile needle that's only used a single time? What is this doing here? And you get a really large healing response drawn to that area. You get blood circulation, you get the movement of fluids, that's our lymphatic system. You get the release of hormones that calm pain and reduce inflammation. So that's the first step. The second step is that each point in acupuncture has a relationship with our central nervous system, with our brain. They found that, well, traditionally we found first that each acupuncture point has its personality, its therapeutic functions. These can be to reduce pain. These can be to, again, to increase blood circulation. They can be to release muscles and connective tissue that might have gotten very bound up and tight. And they can also be to help our nervous system calm down, to treat the spirit, as we say traditionally. And now we have some research that's starting to back up all of these findings.
Yes, we love research, and acupuncture can seem very mysterious to people, but I've used acupuncture very successfully for years, and I was interested I had a session with you, and your needles were so thin, I barely felt them, which is interesting to me. That's the first experience I've had with that.
You don't need to have really big needles. The needles we use in acupuncture are very, very thin, much smaller than the injection needles that I'm scared of personally. And maybe you might sometimes feel a little trepidation with those needles that we use for vaccinations and blood tests and all the other important things that our Western doctors do. But these needles are just very, 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 very thin. But acupuncture is very different, I think.
It's quite different, yes. And that thank you for saying that, because it might reassure people or encourage them to come in who may not otherwise be amenable to needles.
99% of the time when I have patients who tell me they're scared of needles, after the treatment they say, what was I scared of? That's ridiculous. It was just an idea in my head. And that's true. The other thing is that if you ever, for your people watching, if you ever are interested in acupuncture, make sure to tell your acupuncturist, tell me or someone like me about your concerns. We can always go more gently. And I already start very gentle. So there's always a way to match the medicine to the person. And I bring that up because not only in terms of dealing with how concerned we might be about a treatment, etc., but just about the medicine generally. One of the strengths of Chinese medicine is that we do match the medicine to each person.
I think that's really important. I mean, I do that as a movement therapist. I mean, you can't use a cookie cutter approach with this because one person's heavy is another person's too easy. So yeah. I believe, and I also think it's really important to communicate with the practitioner, because, why would you want, I don't want people in pain when they're coming to see me. I want them to tell me, because I can always adjust something or backpedal or do something.
And what I always tell patients, and I think I might have said to you when I gave you a treatment, was that I really think about healing as something we do together.
Yes.
And I, or even other clinicians and myself, all working together with you, the patient. It's not something that someone just sort of does to you. And if we think about it as a give and take, as a dialogue, and as a journey we take together, then we both get a lot further.
I agree with you. I think that's a wonderful point. I'm glad you brought that out. And one of the things that you did, you also did a pulse reading. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. Well, the number one thing with Chinese medicine, our assessments are often built around pulse taking. And it's not just the rate of the pulse, but it's the the amount of blood flowing through that artery in your wrist. Is it big like a river, small like a stream? Arteries have muscle around their periphery, so that muscle, like any muscle, can clench or it can relax. It can vasoconstrict or vasodilate. And we can also get a sense of the viscosity of the blood, the force of the pulse, and the rate, of course. And all of this is really by really listening to the person and to those pulses, it's telling us about how blood is circulating through the whole body. And after a few thousand years, as I like to say, we've sort of worked this out a bit, and it's really quite useful.
And in terms of RSI, can you think of any special advantages that classical acupuncture may have over other techniques?
Well, I always want to respect what everyone brings to the table, but in terms of classical Chinese medicine, classical acupuncture, what I really appreciate when I'm treating patients is that we're working on the area that's gotten frozen or bound up. We're working on the area of pain, but we're really considering it in its relationship. Let's take an example, carpal tunnel syndrome, maybe some of your listeners have heard of on the wrist. That's not just sort of happening in alienation from every other part of your body. It's part of a greater pattern of movement. As we're sitting at a computer, like I am right now, we might be leaning a little forward to see whatever it is we're working on. Our shoulders roll forward, and those nerves that come and end up getting pinched maybe in the carpal tunnel in our wrist are coming from the bottom part of our neck, just as you know, the base of the neck right around C7, the last lowest cervical vertebrae. And they're coming out down into the shoulder and down the arm and into that wrist. And I'm just thinking off the top of my head, and I was thinking before we started having this chat, that there was a colleague of mine, and what he would do, and I've done this myself sometimes, is he would treat a person with very serious carpal tunnel syndrome. We can apply this to any sort of RSI, but carpal tunnel is our example. And he would just free up the neck and the shoulder to start. And there were cases, and I've seen cases, where the wrist frees up just from that. So as you free up, as you make space to everywhere that's attached to an area of pain, sometimes you give that painful area the space it needs to free up by itself. Amazing when you think of the body as a series of relationships, that you can have much greater results than if you just think about, this is my wrist. I have to see a wrist specialist, and if my elbow hurt, I'd have to see an elbow specialist, and my shoulder hurt, then there's a third person. But we really see it all together. And that's true of the lower back, it's true of the knee, it's true of the neck, it's true of anywhere you can get RSI. And I know that you found it to be very similar.
Yes, I mean, a forward head posture is the leading cause of RSI in my estimation. And so what you just said about freeing up the brachial plexus and the neck, it just makes all the sense because those nerves emanate there and they go all the way to the fingertips. So it makes perfect sense. And a lot of people say, why is my physical therapist working on my neck so much? And I'm saying they understand anatomy. They understand the nerve system. So I'm really glad that you brought that up and gave us such a clear explanation.
And acupuncture is, I think, if we want to look at it from a Western context, one of the ways to consider it is really a modality that works with the nervous system very much. And it's a modality that, it's a way of treating that brings balance. So if we're looking at the nerves and trying to bring balance to the nerves, acupuncture is really fantastic when we've had those short circuitings that some doctors like to talk about with RSI.
Well, maybe we should talk about the sympathetic nervous system and how acupuncture will take you from the sympathetic nervous system into the parasympathetic nervous.
Oh, sure. So I'm sure your readers are very, and viewers are very, familiar with this from your other episodes, but just so everyone is on the same place, the sympathetic nervous system is what gets us excited about life, or gets us a little too tense about things. It's what revs us up and gets us a bit stressed. Parasympathetic is often described as rest to digest. And I love that because it's easy to remember and it rhymes. But acupuncture is fantastic I mentioned previously that some acupuncture points, all acupuncture points, the central nervous system. And we can cause a shift in the central nervous system to affect the whole body. And just what you said, shifting from a state of stress, a state of disease, a state of tension, back into a state of bringing energy into the body. That's the rest to digest, and also of healing, rejuvenation. That's our parasympathetic nervous system.
Yes, that's, I was just going to ask you about that. I think that, you know, the fact that you're calm helps with the healing process, because I'm not sure that we really heal when we're ready to fight or flee or freeze.
There's back when I was at Columbia, just getting my undergraduate in psychology, I remember there was a researcher, James Pennebaker, and he basically, I think he's doing other things now, but he spent a huge chunk of his career looking at, well, what do psychology professors look at, really? They look at college students. It's the grist for the mill there. And he was looking at college students at the time of the finals, their big tests, and measuring their nervous system, measuring their immune system and all the rest. And as soon as people got really stressed, their immune systems would just tank.
Yes.
So the healing system would really take a big hit when people were stressed. Actually, I remember he followed it up. I mean, I guess once you have when it comes to research in a university, you really go for it. Finally, he had, back when I was there, he had people in relationships take little diaries of their relationships. And when they sort of were about to break up, this is kind of terrible, but he would be measuring their immune systems the whole time. And
wow.
That kind of stress, their immune systems would tank, which I think we all kind of know if you've been in that sort of situation. But it was nice to have the research. It's not just one kind of stress. It's many different kinds of stress will affect our ability to heal, our ability to fight off infections.
Well, Hans Selye said that stress is the cause of all diseases, if I'm not mistaken. But getting back to the students, did they get sick right after their finals? So they hold it together until the final and then they would collapse? Is that how it works?
Well, I've seen that happen with patients and other people. I think in this case, it was more just measuring the immune system itself. So they were definitely, maybe you had a critical mass of time when the immune system had been suppressed during those tests, testing time. And then, yeah, they were ready to get sick, really. So it was interesting.
So are there any other things that you think we should know about acupuncture that are useful or important or unknown?
I mean, it's an ocean of medicine is really, you can learn it forever and you still haven't, you've only learned a drop of that ocean. So I would say with acupuncture, what I see again is the mind-body connection. I think that's very important because when people have kind of RSI, they're really thinking about the part of their body that's crying out, that's causing the alarm, that's in pain. And they might not be at the top of their mind thinking about the spirit, thinking about their emotions and how it really all interacts. The other thing, of course, is that when we're in pain for a time, it's not just a physical pattern, there's an emotional pattern of being in pain that we need to address too. What my teacher likes to say often is that the state of mind that brought us into pain or disease is not the same state of mind that'll bring us out of it. So in that sense, healing often begins with changing your mind. And that might mean being more open to something like acupuncture, being more open to working with you and other people too.
You know, one thing that I do, and I'd be curious your reaction to this because I experienced this myself. Many people, RSI has an ebb and flow to it. You get better, you know, then you relapse. And this is very common among people who've had it for some time. And I caution people because I do recommend acupuncture for people with RSI if they can find, you know, they can do it. But I tell them don't abuse it because just because you feel better does not necessarily mean you're cured. So you shouldn't go galloping back to the same bad workstation and the same bad work habits where you never take breaks. You haven't addressed any underlying physical imbalance where, you know, you're chronically like this because you're not strong enough in your supportive muscles. So I think there needs to be a sense that this isn't something that you should just, you know, use as a crutch or
Right. Don't just treat the branch, but go to the root of the condition. My teacher
precisely.
also has a saying for this one. It's a lot of sayings, but he likes to say that illness and pain are an invitation to change. So you really don't want to go back to the same life that you've had that led to this pain or this illness. It doesn't mean that your whole life has to change in some scary way, but there has to be some little shifts, little steps that you take where things are a little different. And it's just like you say, our life has to change maybe simply in the way we move, maybe simply in being mindful about some part of our body. And that can definitely be, you know, we get so distracted with our one arm out holding a mouse, the other arm, you know, our arm back doing something, and we're just sort of locked in there for 8 hours getting that spreadsheet done or whatever it is. And there's a lack of mindfulness about the need that our bodies have to move, to do different things, and to stretch and just to breathe.
Yes, and not do the same activity constantly for 8 hours.
Yeah.
Well, Christopher, this has been so enlightening. We've touched on a lot of really interesting topics. I love what you said and the quotes that you gave us from your teacher.
Mm.
I want to thank you so much for
Oh.
coming on.